Let's just acknowledge something right at the beginning. A lot of people are genuinely scared right now. We've got a war in the Middle East again. Iran, Israel, the United States, and it's escalating in a way that has people asking questions that are bigger than any one headline. In Washington, there's already renewed pressure around war powers and congressional authority because many Americans feel like decisions of this magnitude shouldn't be made without clear democratic and constitutional consent. And at the same time, there's another completely different kind of war unfolding. It is a war over technology and control because the Pentagon has been in a public standoff with Anthropic, demanding broader access and fewer safeguards around how its AI can be used, including uses, Anthropic says, cross ethical red lines like domestic mass surveillance or fully autonomous weapons. And even more recently, Anthropic has pushed back and the Pentagon immediately contracted with OpenAI. And then layered on top of all of that, you have this accelerating consolidation of media power. You've got mergers and ownership structures that would put how we receive information under a smaller number of hands. And people naturally wonder what that means for dissent and criticism and the rights of acceptable free speech in the years ahead. Meanwhile, you've got the Epstein files situation where millions of pages have been released, and yet a lot of people still feel like transparency and accountability is incomplete. What's being revealed is not proportionate to the level of corruption that they suspect has existed behind the scenes. So if you zoom out and take all of this in at once, war, intelligence agencies, AI, surveillance capacity, media consolidation, distrust in institutions, I certainly understand why it can feel like we're drifting towards some hybrid of 1984 and a Terminator-style future where the system tightens and ordinary people like you and I lose our freedoms and our voice. But here's what I want to do in this episode. I want to walk you through how this actually works. Because when you understand the structure underneath these events, you stop reacting purely in fear and you start positioning yourself intelligently. And when you understand history, not just the last 5 years, but the arc of civilizations, you realize that something counterintuitive happens. The tightening and the corruption that we're seeing is often the contraction that precedes an expansion. In fact, there's a pattern that shows up again and again in history, and it's the key to understanding why this moment feels so intense and sometimes so insane. And I call it the control paradox. The more a system tries to clamp down to preserve itself, the more it unintentionally accelerates the conditions that cause people to exit it. And once enough people exit, there's a rebound expansion that begins. And so that's why I actually believe all of these things are the signs that the future is certainly going to be good. Let's talk about this step by step. Most people assume that politics runs the world, but politics is largely theater. It's layered on top of much deeper systems. Beneath party lines and election cycles, there are several interacting domains of power that shape global outcomes. And right now, those domains are colliding in public ways and, frankly, in ways that they never have before. So at the foundation of this system, or bucket number one, is what I would call the financial industrial complex. These are the central banks, the global asset managers, the commercial banks, the sovereign debt markets, and increasingly crypto infrastructure. If you look at who the apex predator is within the asset managers, you've got Larry Fink at BlackRock. If you look at who the apex predator is within crypto, you've got Coinbase. These institutions do not operate based on ideology. They operate based on liquidity, stability, and capital flow. So when there's war, when there's supply chain disruption, when oil prices spike, when currencies wobble, the financial system reacts immediately to preserve equilibrium and to maximize that. And that doesn't make it moral or immoral. It makes it structural. War is never purely ideological. It's always entangled with monetary dynamics. On top of that layer, you've got another bucket, which is sovereign states. Every nation, whether it's democratic or authoritarian or somewhere in between, operates from perceived survival logic. You've got security, geographic buffers, access to resources, and regime continuity that all drive the decision-making for the sovereigns. Whether we're talking about China and Taiwan, Russia and Ukraine, or the United States and its hemispheric posture with Venezuela, Cuba, or Greenland, the pattern is consistent. States or sovereigns act from vulnerability management. What makes this area uniquely destabilizing is the third bucket that has emerged, the technocrats. For the first time in modern history, private technology companies are controlling infrastructure that rivals or exceeds the influence of governments. Everything from Meta and Mark Zuckerberg to Amazon and Jeff Bezos to Palantir and Elon Musk to Peter Thiel, you've got artificial intelligence labs and cloud computing platforms, data monopolies, algorithmic information pipelines. These technology entities shape not only markets, but they're starting to shape perception itself. AI is not just another innovation. It is an intelligence amplifier. It compresses analysis, decision-making, targeting, prediction, and automation to systems that operate at speeds that humans cannot match. And when defense agencies seek access to powerful AI models, it's not about better chatbots. It's about battlefield modeling, surveillance optimization, strategic forecasting, and force multiplication. Then you've got the fourth bucket, the military, industrial complex, and intelligence agencies. You've got defense contractors, the CIA, security bureaucracies. These institutions do not disappear when administrations change. They're pervasive, operating on a continuity logic. Their mission is threat neutralization and strategic advantage. Historically, they've incorporated every emerging technology, from radio to satellites to GPS to the internet. AI is following that same trajectory. What we're witnessing right now is not random chaos. It's the convergence of financial power, sovereign power, technological power, and military and intelligence power. For the first time ever, it's colliding visibly. This visibility, amplified by social media leaks, independent journalism, and global connectivity, is what feels destabilizing. So add media consolidation to the mix when large conglomerates merge, when ownership concentrates, when narratives appear aligned with specific geopolitical positions, people start to feel boxed in. We fear that if we have an opposing view, we'll be suppressed. These fears are not irrational. They are responses to centralization. But here is where the analysis needs to go deeper. When a system becomes unstable, it tightens its grip in order to preserve itself. But the tighter it grips, the more it exposes its own fear, the more it erodes its own legitimacy, and the more it drives people to exit the system altogether. Once enough people exit, new parallel structures start forming organically, and the culture rebounds into expansion. This is the control paradox. When legitimacy collapses, people do something quiet and strategic. They withdraw. They stop consuming the narrative. They disengage psychologically, financially, culturally, and spiritually. This is why independent media became inevitable. People simply stopped watching legacy media and moved to podcasts, independent journalism, and direct-to-audience creators. It's not that someone like Joe Rogan got big, it's that the cultural architecture shifted from centralized broadcast to distributed networks. Consolidation looks powerful until the audience stops participating. So when you see clampdowns, remember they train exit, they don't prevent it. They actually accelerate it. Step 5 is the awakening, or what I refer to as the cognitive shift. When enough people withdraw from the existing system, they start to look for alternatives. These alternatives don't just materialize from thin air, though. There's a cultural and technological infrastructure already emerging that supports these parallel systems. Independent media, alternative currency systems like cryptocurrencies, decentralized finance, and DeFi, and distributed autonomous organizations, DAOs, are examples of this. This shift isn't just technological, it's philosophical. People start to think differently about trust, governance, and authority. They begin to realize that true power isn't just about controlling information or resources, it's about influence and network communities. This is the exit that in many ways has already begun. And it's why we see rapid technological development in decentralized technologies such as blockchain and peer-to-peer networks. These systems inherently disrupt the traditional power structures that rely on control. The second part of step 5 is the cultural expansion. When the exit happens, there's a shift toward building alternatives, systems, communities, and solutions that are self-sustaining. People stop waiting for permission and start creating from the ground up. It's an organic movement, often accelerated by technological advancements that make it easier for individuals and groups to organize, connect, and exchange value outside of traditional systems. So one example of this cultural expansion is the rise of independent content creators. The mainstream media in its consolidated form becomes less relevant to those who no longer trust its narrative. As people leave and turn to alternatives, they begin to recognize the value of authentic voices who challenge the status quo. We see this in the rise of independent podcasts, YouTube channels, and other platforms where the individual can create and distribute their own content without the need for a gatekeeper. The third element of this phase is the economic decentralization. With the breakdown of trust in traditional financial systems, cryptocurrencies and other digital assets provide a safe haven for many individuals and even institutions. These decentralized systems not only allow for the storage of value outside the control of traditional banks, but they also provide an avenue for creating wealth outside of government-regulated markets. The rise of Bitcoin and Ethereum is a prime example of this. Moreover, there's an increasing interest in decentralized finance at DeFi, which allows individuals to engage in financial transactions without intermediaries like banks. It's a rapidly growing sector with billions of dollars locked in various DeFi protocols. This creates a scenario where traditional finance is no longer the only game in town. So many are finding that decentralization offers them a path toward financial autonomy. Step 6 is the institutional fracturing. This is the natural result of the contraction process. Systems that once appeared solid and unshakable begin to fracture. The cracks start to show in ways that are impossible to ignore. For example, look at the deep distrust in governments and institutions worldwide. In the United States, the political divide is more pronounced than ever. Many Americans feel that their voice doesn't matter and that they're governed by a system that is more interested in maintaining power than serving the people. This fracturing isn't limited to politics alone. We see it in media too. As media conglomerates consolidate their power, they become more vulnerable to accusations of bias, misinformation, and censorship. Their monopoly on information flow erodes and people naturally seek out alternatives. The same fracturing can be observed in other institutional areas, education, healthcare, and even religion. People no longer believe in the institutions that once held society together. This results in a rise of local and grassroots movements that seek to reclaim power from these centralized forces. In many cases, this fracturing is the catalyst for the formation of new institutions that operate on different principles, ones that are more inclusive, transparent, and responsive to the needs of the people. Step 7 is the emergence of new narratives. As people withdraw from traditional systems, they begin to create their own understanding of the world. These new narratives often challenge the old ones, offering alternative explanations for global events, social structures, and even individual purpose. These new narratives spread quickly, fueled by the internet and social media. One of the most exciting aspects of this phase is the focus on empowerment through information. As people begin to disengage from centralized institutions, they turn to independent sources for news and knowledge. Podcasts, YouTube videos, and independent journalism fill the gaps left by traditional outlets. People begin to understand that the way forward is not to rely on old systems, but to build their own. Step 8 is the structural reorganization. As people begin to build alternatives, they start to restructure their societies and systems. It's not about dismantling everything and starting from scratch, but rather about rethinking what we've been told about what's possible. Systems of governance are becoming more localized and decentralized. Communities are finding new ways to come together, collaborate, and create value. In this phase, we begin to see the emergence of new forms of governance that operate in fundamentally different ways. Instead of centralized systems of power, we see decentralized systems such as DAOs that rely on the collective input of the people they serve. These new forms of governance are often powered by blockchain technology, which allows for transparency, security, and immutability. This reorganization is not just about technology or economics. It's a reorganization of values. The principles that guide society are evolving as people begin to question long-standing assumptions about the role of government, the media, and the economy. Yeah. There's a growing focus on sustainability, community building, and personal empowerment. Step 9 is the cultural renaissance. When systems of control start to break down, new cultural movements emerge. These movements are driven by the desire for freedom, creativity, and authenticity. People start to think outside the box, coming up with new ways to live, work, and create. These movements often reject the materialism, consumerism, and centralization that characterized previous generations. This renaissance is most evident in the rise of independent creators, individuals who are able to create and distribute their work without relying on traditional institutions. So this isn't just limited to content creation. It also extends to art, music, technology, and even business. The decentralized nature of the internet allows creators to reach a global audience without needing a middleman. This creates a cultural landscape where creativity thrives and new ideas flourish. Step 10 is the rebirth of systems, the ultimate realization that the collapse of the old system was not the end, but the beginning of something new. As the old systems break down, new ones take their place. These new systems are more flexible, decentralized, and responsive to the needs of the people. They are built from the ground up, incorporating the lessons learned from the past. This rebirth isn't just technological or economic, it's a spiritual rebirth as well. People begin to realize that their true power lies not in their ability to conform to the existing system, but in their ability to create new systems that align with their values. This process is already happening, it's accelerating.